I never thought sharing a bed with a guy I'd barely hung out with outside a group setting would be a thing I'd do. But there I was, lying awake at 2 a.m. in a stranger's apartment, trying not to think about how weird everything had gotten in the last 24 hours. Let me back up a bit. So I'm Alex, 28, decent job, average social life. I'm not the kind of guy who jumps into people's personal drama, but sometimes life tosses you into the deep end without asking if you can swim. This whole mess started last weekend when my friend Matt, Matt, the guy I'm talking about, called me out of nowhere, sounding pretty shaken. Matt and I have been in the same friend circle for years. We'd always had this easygoing rapport. Nothing close or complicated. He's the kind of guy who can light up a room just by showing up, but behind that smile, he's got this tough streak. Recently, he'd been dating this guy for almost 2 years, and they'd seemed solid, or so I thought. Anyway, Matt texted me Saturday afternoon, saying he needed to get out of his place. Something about a breakup went down that morning, and he sounded off. I figured, okay, breakups please me. He needs a distraction. I told him to come over to my apartment. We could grab some beer and watch the game, nothing fancy. When he got there, it was clear things were worse than I had expected. Matt was quiet, way quieter than usual, and every now and then, he'd just stare at the wall like his mind had checked out. We sat on the couch, a couple of beers between us, the TV blaring with some dull sports commentary, but neither of us really watching. Then came the part where things went sideways. Matt's place was a disaster after the breakup. Empty wine bottles, piles of clothes, that kind of thing. When I told him he could crash at mine if he didn't want to be alone, he hesitated, then nodded. I figured it was just a one-night thing. No big deal, right? Except my apartment isn't huge. It's a one-bedroom with a sofa that folds out, and that's it. The couch was taken, so somehow, we ended up agreeing to share my bed. That's where the weird part starts. We're not exactly close, and yet there we were, two grown men awkwardly trying to find a way to fall asleep without crossing any invisible line. I mean, it wasn't like we were hooking up or anything, but the silence between us felt heavier than any noise. I kept wondering if he regretted asking to stay, or if I was overthinking everything. I turned off the lights, but the room felt too bright with the city lights bleeding through the curtains. Matt was already under the covers, eyes wide open. "Hey," I whispered. "Hey," he said back, voice low, and that's when I realized this night was going to be anything but normal. "Can't sleep?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual but honestly curious. Matt shrugged, but didn't look at me. "Not really. Too much on my mind, I guess." I nodded, trying to think of something to say that wouldn't sound like a therapist's script. We'd never been close enough for that kind of deep talk, and honestly, I wasn't sure how to be that guy. So I just went with what felt natural. "Breakups please me," I said. "I'm sorry you're going through it." He finally glanced over at me, and there was this flicker in his eyes, like he was about to say something, then decided against it. "Yeah," he muttered, "feels like I'm losing part of myself." That hit me harder than I expected. I mean, I'd seen breakups happen to friends before, but hearing it put so plainly, in that moment, made it real in a way I hadn't thought about. We lay there, the silence growing but somehow feeling less heavy now. The city noises outside filtered in, sirens, distant laughter from a bar down the street. And it was like the world kept moving, even when your own did not. After a while, Matt shifted closer, just a few inches, but enough that I noticed. "Thanks for letting me stay," he said quietly. "Of course," I replied. "You'd do the same for me." He smiled a little, but it was tired. I probably would. And then, before I knew it, we were talking. Not about his ex or the breakup directly, at least not yet, but about smaller stuff. Music we liked. Dumb movies we'd seen recently. The weird coffee place down the street we both liked but had never mentioned to each other before. It felt weirdly comforting, like rediscovering a friend you hadn't really noticed before. At one point, Matt laughed. A real laugh, not the forced kind he'd had earlier. And I realized how rare that had been lately for him. "Maybe this isn't so bad," he said, half-jokingly. "Yeah," I said. "Could be worse. We could be stuck in some awkward hotel lobby." He shook his head. "You're really bad at that," I grinned. "Thanks, man." For a few minutes, the mood lightened, but then his expression shifted again. "I keep thinking about how it all ended," he said, voice low. I hesitated. "You want to talk about it?" he sighed. I don't know if talking helps, but maybe it does. And so he did. Matt told me about the fight that morning. The words said that couldn't be taken back, the way everything suddenly felt like it was crumbling around him. I listened, really listened, not interrupting, just letting him get it out. When he finished, there was a long pause. Then he looked at me, eyes full of something I couldn't quite place. Vulnerability? Maybe hope? "This is the first time I've told anyone all that," he admitted. I felt this weird swell in my chest. "Thanks for trusting me." We stayed quiet for a bit, the kind of silence that actually feels like connection. I wasn't sure if it was the exhaustion or the honesty, but it felt like a turning point. Then Matt shifted again, closer this time, until our shoulders touched. I didn't pull away. He didn't either. "Don't know what the next step is," he said. "Neither do I." I replied honestly. After a while, he whispered, "Promise me something?" "Yeah? Promise me I won't be a mess forever." I smiled, feeling something genuine. "I promise. You're stronger than you think." He looked down, then back up at me. Maybe I need help believing that. Maybe we both do. The room felt warmer, less like a stranger's place, and more like something temporary but safe. And for the first time since I'd known Matt, I saw him as more than just a friend in a group, or the guy who's always cracking jokes at parties. It was like I was seeing him, really seeing him, for the first time. Sleep finally came, but it was different. It wasn't just shutting my eyes and hoping for the best. It was knowing that whatever weird, messy thing this was, it wasn't just me alone in it. That maybe, somehow, sharing a bed after a breakup might be the start of something neither of us expected. But I wasn't ready to say that out loud yet. For now, I just lay there, next to Matt, and let the quiet do its work. Morning came with a faint gray light sneaking through my blinds, and for a moment I was disoriented, wondering where I was. Then I remembered Matt was still here, asleep next to me. I could feel the slight rise and fall of his breathing through the thin sheet between us. It was strange waking up like that, after a night that started with awkwardness, but ended with something else. Something quieter, something like comfort. I didn't want to disturb him, so I carefully slipped out of bed, trying not to make a noise. I padded into the kitchen and started a pot of coffee, the familiar routine grounding me. As I waited, I found myself thinking about Matt in a way I hadn't before. Like, I'd always liked him as a friend, but last night had shifted something. Maybe it was the vulnerability he'd shown, or just the way we'd connected when everything else had fallen apart for him. When I came back to the bedroom carrying 2 mugs of coffee, Matt was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring out the window like he was trying to piece something together. "Morning," I said softly, handing him a mug. He took it with a small smile. "Morning." We sat there for a moment, sipping coffee in silence. It felt natural, like this was the kind of morning 2 people who had been through something hard might share. So I said, "What's the plan? Are you crashing here for a while, or?" Matt shrugged, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. I mean, I can't go back to my place right now. Too many memories. But I don't want to overstay, you know?" I nodded. "Yeah, no pressure. You can stay as long as you need." He looked at me then, eyes searching. "Thanks, Alex. Seriously." That simple exchange felt heavier than it should have, because I realized this wasn't just about a bed for the night anymore. There was this unspoken question hanging between us. What happens next? Over the next few days, Matt stayed. We slipped into a weird routine that felt surprisingly easy. Mornings filled with rushed coffee and quiet conversations. Afternoons where we sometimes just sat together watching random TV shows neither of us really cared about. Nights where the city outside buzzed and we talked about everything and nothing. One evening, a couple of nights after he'd moved in, we were sitting on the couch, both scrolling on our phones when Matt suddenly put his device down. "Hey, can I ask you something?" he said. "Shoot." He looked hesitant, like he was weighing whether to say it out loud. "Have you ever thought about us, like, not just as friends?" I blinked, heart skipping. "Us?" "Yeah," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I mean, you're the only person I've been around since this all went down. And I don't know, maybe I'm reading into it, but it feels different, like you're not just a friend. I swallowed hard, trying to process. The truth was, I'd been thinking about that too. The way I noticed the little things. How his hand sometimes brushed mine, or the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. I told myself it was just me being overly sensitive to his pain, but now, I have thought about it. I admitted, more than I probably should. Matt let out a soft laugh, a little nervous but genuine. Good to know I'm not crazy. Definitely not crazy, I said. Maybe just a little hopeful. For a moment, it felt like the room held its breath. Then Matt reached out and took my hand. It was tentative, like testing the waters, but it sent a jolt straight through me. I don't want to mess up what we have, he said, voice low. But maybe this, whatever this is, could be something. I squeezed his hand gently. Maybe it already is. That night, when we finally went to bed, the space between us had shrunk even more. We didn't say much, but the silence wasn't heavy or awkward anymore. It felt like a promise. The next morning, though, things got complicated. Matt's phone rang early, and when he answered, his face changed. It was his ex, calling to talk. Matt's jaw tightened, and I could see the storm brewing behind his eyes. After he hung up, he looked at me and said, I don't know if I'm ready for this. Ready for what? To move on. To even think about moving on. I pulled him close, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. You don't have to decide anything right now. He leaned into me, and for the first time I felt like maybe we were both searching for something new, something real, in the middle of all the mess life had thrown our way. But I also knew it wouldn't be easy. Breakups leave scars, and stepping into something new means facing all the doubts and fears head on. Still, lying there with Matt in my arms, I figured maybe that was worth it. Whatever weird this had gotten, maybe it was the start of something neither of us saw coming, and honestly, I was ready to find out where it could go. The next few days were a mix of careful steps and silent questions between us. I could tell Matt was wrestling with a lot. His ex's call shook something loose, and I wasn't naive enough to think feelings just switch on and off like a light bulb. But there was this fragile, tentative thread connecting us, and neither of us wanted to pull it too hard, too fast. One night, we were sitting on the floor of my apartment, leaning against the coffee table, with a nearly empty pizza box between us. I was nursing a beer, and Matt was scrolling through some playlist on his phone, looking for something to break the quiet. So, what's the plan after all this? I asked, nodding toward the mess around us. You gonna move back to your place or keep crashing here? Matt shrugged, looking a little lost. I don't know. I haven't been there since that day. Too many ghosts. Yeah, I said softly. Breakups have a way of making your own space feel like a stranger's. He glanced over at me, and this time, his eyes held something softer, more open. You ever think maybe it's not just the place? Maybe it's the people we let in. The words caught me off guard. What do you mean? Matt hesitated, then said, I mean, maybe I'm scared of getting close again, not just to him, but to anyone. And now with you, it feels different, but it's scary. I nodded, understanding more than I probably should. Yeah, I get that. Feels like the last thing you want is to get hurt again. He looked down, playing with the edge of the pizza box. Exactly, but at the same time, I don't want to be alone. For a moment, I didn't say anything. Instead, I reached out and squeezed his hand, the gesture small but meaningful. You're not alone, I whispered. After that, things started to shift. We spent more time together, but it wasn't just about survival or distraction anymore. It was about building something new, even if neither of us had the full picture yet. One afternoon, we took a walk through the park near my place. The air was crisp, and the leaves were turning that burnt orange shade that screams fall. Matt was unusually quiet, staring at a group of kids kicking a soccer ball around. Hey, I said, nudging him gently. What's on your mind? He sighed. I've been thinking about what you said the other night, about moving on. It's terrifying, you know? Like, what if I'm just setting myself up for more pain? I looked at him, really looked at him, the way he was trying to keep it together, but visibly struggling underneath. Yeah, it's scary. I agreed, but sometimes the only way to heal is to take that risk. Matt smiled a little, that same tired but real smile from before. "You sound like you've been through this." "Maybe I have," I said, "or maybe I'm just optimistic. But I want to believe it's worth it." We walked a little further, and I found my hand brushing against his. This time, he didn't pull away. Instead, we intertwined fingers, the contact warm and steady. "Thanks for sticking around," he said softly. I squeezed his hand. "You don't have to thank me. I'm glad I'm here." That night, things felt different between us. We watched a movie, but neither of us paid much attention. Instead, we really talked, about hopes, fears, and the messy stuff we usually keep hidden. At one point, Matt looked at me and said, "I never thought I'd find someone like you in all this chaos." I smiled, feeling my chest tighten. "Me neither." Later, when we were getting ready for bed, Matt hesitated at the doorway. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." He took a deep breath. "Would you want to try this?" "Us?" "I mean, for real." Not just because things were broken and messy. I looked at him, the guy who'd become the closest thing to a safe place I'd had in a long time. "Yes," I said simply. "I want that." Matt's face lit up with a mixture of relief and something tender. "Me too." We didn't need to say more. The night stretched out before us, full of questions and possibilities. But even as I lay there beside him, hands tangled together, I knew the real challenge was just beginning. Because love after heartbreak is never simple. It's messy, uncertain, and sometimes downright scary. Yet somehow, that night felt like the first page of a new story. One I was willing to write, with Matt by my side, no matter how weird or unpredictable it might get. The days that followed felt like walking on a tightrope stretched between what was familiar and what was new, and honestly, a little terrifying. We'd crossed some invisible line, but neither of us was sure exactly what it meant yet. And maybe that was the point, figuring out what us looked like without rushing or forcing anything. One afternoon, I was at my desk working, drowning in emails and trying to concentrate when Matt popped into the room holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Thought you could use a break," he said, setting one down next to my laptop. I glanced up, surprised by the small, thoughtful gesture. "Thanks," I said, taking a sip. "You're a lifesaver," he smiled, that easy, genuine smile that made my chest do this weird flutter I wasn't sure how to explain. "So," he started, "I was thinking we never really talked about what happened with him. His ex, of course." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "Yeah, I kind of figured that conversation was coming." Matt looked uncomfortable, like he wanted to say a lot, but wasn't sure where to start. "I guess I just want to understand it better," he said. "Why it ended, why it hurt so much." I nodded slowly. Breakups are messy. Sometimes it's not about one person being right or wrong. It's both people not fitting anymore. He looked over at me. "Do you think it's possible to really move on from someone like that? Or do you just carry it with you?" I thought about it. "I think you carry a part of them, yeah. But it doesn't have to weigh you down forever. Eventually, it just becomes part of your story, not the whole thing." Matt smiled, a little sad but grateful. "That makes sense." Later that evening, we went out for a walk. The city was glowing, neon signs reflecting off wet pavement after a light rain. The kind of night that feels like an unofficial reset button. We stopped by a little bookstore that was still open, and Matt pulled out a worn paperback he'd picked up. "Want to read something with me?" he asked, flipping to a marked page. I nodded, intrigued. We sat on the curb outside, taking turns, reading paragraphs aloud. It was ridiculously romantic in a way neither of us expected. 2 guys sharing a book on a chilly sidewalk. Afterward, we walked back home, our hands brushing occasionally before finally settling into a comfortable hold. That night, lying in bed, Matt surprised me. "Can I ask you something a little crazy?" he whispered. "Hit me." "What if this us doesn't feel weird anymore? What if it feels like the only thing that makes sense?" I turned toward him, heart pounding. "Then I'd say we're on to something." He smiled, and that was all I needed to know. The weirdness had shifted. It wasn't awkward anymore. It was hope. But just as things started to feel real, the past wasn't ready to let go. A few days later, Matt got a text from someone I'd hoped we were done talking about. His ex. The message was short but heavy. "Can we talk?" I think I made a mistake. Matt showed me the text, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. "What do you want to do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He hesitated. "I don't know. Part of me wants closure, but another part just wants this nightmare to end." I took his hand. "Whatever you decide, I've got your back." That night, we talked long into the early hours about boundaries, trust, and what we both needed. It was messy and real, the kind of raw honesty that either breaks something or makes it stronger. In the end, Matt decided not to respond. Not yet. Not until he was sure what he wanted. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about two guys figuring out if they could be something more. It was about learning how to hold on, how to let go, and how to be brave enough to start over, even when it's scary as hell. Matt looked over at me, sleep tugging at his eyelids, but a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "Thanks for staying," he murmured. I smiled back, feeling more certain than ever. Always. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of rain tapping gently against the window. It was one of those gray, cold days that make you want to pull the covers back over your head and forget the world exists. But I could hear Matt moving around the kitchen, the clink of mugs and the soft hum of the coffee maker. The little rhythms of everyday life. Normal, grounding. I shuffled out of bed, still half asleep, and found him leaning against the counter, staring out at the wet street below. His hair tousled like he'd just rolled out of bed, which he had. He looked tired, but there was a quiet determination in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "Morning," I said, trying to sound more awake than I felt. "Morning," he replied, turning to hand me a mug. The coffee was strong, and just how I liked it. "Sleep okay?" "Better than I expected," I said, taking a sip. "You?" He shrugged. "I'm trying." We both knew those words meant a lot more than just how well he slept. The breakup, the texts from his ex, the uncertainty, it was all still hanging over him like a cloud. We sat at the kitchen table in silence, sipping our coffee, letting the rain fill the space between us in a way words couldn't. Then Matt spoke, voice low but steady. "I'm thinking of going back to my place." I choked on my coffee. "Wait, really? After everything?" He nodded. "Yeah, I need to face it. Pretending it's not there isn't helping." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "If you're sure." "But," I hesitated. "You know you don't have to do it alone, right?" Matt gave me a small smile, the kind that made my heart skip. "I know, and I'm glad you've been here. It's helped more than I can say." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Whenever you want, I'll come with you. Or we can figure it out together." He looked at me, eyes searching. "Would you?" "Of course," I said without hesitation. The thought of being there with him through whatever came next made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't just friendship anymore, not by a long shot. Later that day, we went to his apartment together. It was the first time I'd been there since the breakup. Walking through the door felt like stepping into a place frozen in time. Empty wine glasses on the counter, a jacket hanging on the back of a chair, the faint scent of his ex lingering in the air like an unwelcome guest. Matt looked around, swallowing hard. "It's going to take some work," he said quietly. We spent hours cleaning, moving things around, trying to make it feel less like a mausoleum and more like home again. I could see the weight lifting off his shoulders little by little, and it made me realize how much I wanted to be part of that process, not just as a friend, but as someone who cared deeply about him. After we finished, we collapsed on his couch, exhausted. Matt turned to me and smiled, genuinely this time. "Thank you, Alex, for everything." I smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Anytime." That night, we didn't talk about the past or what might come next. Instead, we just sat close, the comfort of shared space and quiet companionship filling the gaps where words might have stumbled. The next few weeks were a patchwork of moments, some awkward, some beautiful. We navigated the tricky terrain of becoming something new while still carrying the scars of what came before. Matt was tentative at first, shy smiles and cautious touches, but gradually the walls started to come down. One night we were cooking dinner together, the kitchen filled with the smells of garlic and roasted vegetables. Matt laughed when I accidentally dropped a spoon, and it felt like the first real laugh I'd heard from him in a long time. "You're a disaster," he teased. "Thanks," I grinned. I aimed to impress. As we ate, the conversation drifted to our pasts and futures, hopes and fears. Matt looked at me with a softness that made my chest ache. "I'm scared," he admitted, "of getting hurt again, of not being enough. But with you, it feels different." I reached across the table and took his hand. "It's scary for me too, but maybe scary means it's worth it." He smiled, eyes shining. "Maybe." That night, when we finally fell asleep tangled in sheets and quiet promises, I realized how far we'd come. What started as a weird, awkward night sharing a bed after a breakup had grown into something fragile and real, something I wanted to fight for. There's no telling where this road will lead, but one thing's for sure. I'm not walking it alone, and honestly, that's more than enough for now. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, the awkwardness between us faded into something steady and true. Matt and I settled into a rhythm. Not perfect, but real. There were still hard conversations and moments when the past crept in, but we faced them together, one step at a time. One evening, after a lazy Sunday spent binge-watching old movies and ordering way too much takeout, Matt turned to me with that familiar shy smile. "Alex," he said softly, reaching for my hand. "I know this started in the middle of all my mess, but I'm glad you stuck around." I squeezed his hand, feeling a warmth that didn't come from the coffee we'd been drinking. "Me too. You've become one of the most important parts of my life." He laughed quietly. "Guess that means we're officially more than the weird bed-sharing story." I grinned. "Definitely more." We talked late into the night, not about declarations or grand plans, but about how we wanted to keep building this, slowly, honestly, without forcing anything. One night, lying in bed, I watched Matt sleep. The steady rise and fall of his chest, the way his hand found mine without thinking. In that quiet moment, I realized that love doesn't always come crashing in like a thunderstorm. Sometimes, it sneaks up on you, in the small acts of kindness, the shared silences, the courage to be vulnerable. We didn't need fireworks or dramatic gestures. What we had was enough, a connection born out of brokenness and patched together with trust. And that felt like everything. So yeah, it got weird at first. Sharing a bed with a guy who'd just broken up with his boyfriend wasn't in my life plan. But sometimes, the best stories start in the most unexpected ways. Matt taught me that. And maybe in some strange, beautiful way, I taught him the same. We're still figuring it out, still navigating the twists and turns, but I'm not scared anymore. Because this time, I'm not alone. And that, honestly, makes all the difference.